I would like to first of all welcome everyone to CareSmarts 360 on air. This is a home care podcast, and I'm Dennis Gill, a senior sales consultant at CareSmarts. So, regarding the topic that we're going to discuss today, preventing burnout in home care is crucial to maintaining the health and the well-being of the caregivers and the recipients both. Self-care is the first strategy, which includes regular exercise, a balanced diet, and adequate sleep. So caregivers must also ensure that they take breaks, have time for relaxation and hobbies. Setting boundaries is another important strategy. Caregivers need to understand their limits, communicate them effectively to avoid overextending themselves. Further, professional support can be beneficial, such as joining caregiver support groups or seeking counseling to manage stress. Training and education can also help caregivers feel more competent and less overwhelmed. They should be trained in the specific needs of the person they're caring for, including any medical or behavioral issues. And finally, respite care services can provide temporary relief for the caregivers, allowing them to rest and recharge. So, implementing these strategies can help prevent burnout, leading to better care for recipients and a healthier, more balanced life for caregivers. So, guys, today we have Colleen DelVecchio on the panel, who is the founder of Maxady, a strategic, strengths-based, and equity-focused coaching, consulting, and training firm. So, Colleen has been a leadership coach for over 2 decades and guides business teams to maximize each person's ability to increase impact, performance, and job satisfaction. So, welcome to the podcast, Colleen.
Thanks, Dennis. It's great to be here today.
Okay, we're really grateful that you took out the time for this session today, which we feel, and obviously which you also feel is very important for the caregivers, how their day-to-day life goes, how they are going on with the work. So it will be a really beneficial thing for them. Thank you for your time.
Sure.
Okay, so I'll straight away start with my first query for that. So firstly, how does caregiver burnout differ from caregiver stress, depression, and compassion fatigue? What do you suggest in that?
Sure. Yeah. The World Health Organization actually included burnout in their 11th revision of the International Classification of Diseases a few
Oh,
years ago, right?
okay.
Because they realized that burnout is a special kind of workplace stress, right? It is chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. It becomes a state of physical and emotional exhaustion that involves kind of a sense of reduced accomplishment. And the Mayo Clinic went as far as to say it is also a loss of personal identity. So I feel like burnout is almost taking those other pieces, which are really important to manage as well, but almost to the next level, right? It tends to occur when people are overwhelmed, they're emotionally drained, right? They can't meet the constant demands. And when I think of caregivers,
Mhm.
right, my goodness, right? I could see how quickly this group is a group of folks who can feel really overwhelmed and emotionally drained and unable to meet the constant demands of their work.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Because for the past 5 years, I've been associated with this industry. So I do understand some of the things. I won't say all. So what challenges they face, obviously, you are more competent in that thing. And continuing this question, so considering the unique demands of home care, as we was just saying, such as emotional labor and unpredictable schedules, mainly we can say. What
Mhm.
specific strategies can leaders implement to help their caregivers avoid the burnout specifically, if you can say?
Sure. There's a few things that folks, I think, need to figure out for themselves. One is to start by kind of acknowledging or even just knowing that you're burned out. I think for many folks, they don't notice those initial signs, and
Uh-huh.
those initial signs are going to be different for everybody. When I talk about this, I often talk about for myself, my first initial sign is that I start snapping at my dog. Right. My
Oh,
dog will do normal dog things, and all of a
uh-huh.
sudden I'm yelling at him. Or I have a hard time making decisions. Decision fatigue is one of those kind of early signs of burnout that I think a lot of people just don't realize, right? It's that, you're standing in the grocery store and you can't decide which spaghetti sauce to buy or which box of pasta, right? You're
Got it.
just,
Got it.
right? You've just hit that point that you just can't make another decision. So, I think part of it is starting with this. Make sure you kind of understand what are your telltale signs that you're starting to get burnt out so you don't get to the really severe end of it, that you kind of put a stop to it at the early stages. The other piece is really learning how to have good conversations with both your boss, your employer, with, other people on your team, being able to communicate these things and to say, you know what, I'm really starting to hit this level of burnout. I need to do something right now. Um, I think one of the interesting pieces is that a lot of the burnout advice in the past was always things like, go get a massage, take a day off, and
Yeah.
yes, taking a break is important, right? Constant work is not going to, do anybody good. But a lot of the newer research that has been happening post COVID is saying that most people, their primary cause of their burnout is how they are managed at work and how they're experiencing work. So things like they feel like they're being treated unfairly at work, right? They
Hmm.
think other people are getting the better shifts, right? They're stuck with the shift that nobody wants, right? They're the one who has to work the holiday and no one else does. Or, unmanageable workload, right? They feel like they have too many patients at a time and can't handle it, right? That it's too much work and that feels like they can't kind of manage it. So I think, starting to think about those pieces and getting that support from their manager, right? And having and making I think the other flip side of that is making sure that managers in healthcare are trained on how to manage people, right? Often we take our very best nurse and make them the nurse manager, and now they're not doing nurse jobs anymore. They're now a manager of people. And it's a completely different job. So we need to really support our managers so they can see these signs of burnout, so they can support their staff even when there's a lot of work, right? Even if it feels like the workload is huge, if you have a manager who you can have a great conversation with, that you can get support from, um, employees who agree that they felt supported by their managers are 70% less likely to experience burnout.
Oh,
But so
okay.
often, right, we just don't train managers on how to do that. We don't train managers on how to support people. We train managers on how to do manager paperwork, right? I
Yeah,
think,
I
right.
understand that. I completely get that. That's in the every industry, I would say. Yeah, that's
Yes.
a very good point. That's a very good point, which should be taken care of. I do really like that. And continuing with this one, like as you were just saying, that burnout often stems from feelings of isolation, right? So that's what you were also saying. So
Yeah.
leaders, as you were saying, firstly, what the managers can do, obviously you were was suggesting on that part. So leaders in home care foster a sense of connection, how they can do that, and community among geographically dispersed caregivers. So I think
Sure.
same would be the answer for that, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of that. I also think it's figuring out, right? How do you get people to feel like they have a connection? Gallup, the kind of Gallup poll people, they do a lot of this research on workplace burnout. And one of the questions they ask people is, do you have a best friend at work?
Oh, okay.
Right? It's just an interesting kind of question to get a pulse on how engaged your employees are, whether they're at risk for burnout. And so I think as a manager and a leader, how do you foster that? Like, how do you foster your staff getting to know each other where people feel like they have somebody that they can kind of complain to, have a conversation with, ask questions of, the person who feels like their friend at work. Because when people do have that friend at work, again, less likely to feel burnt out and way more engaged as an employee.
Yeah, that's completely correct. If I think it that way, I'm not in the office if I don't have a friend. I think it will be difficult for me too. I get the
Yeah,
point. I get the point. Yeah. And obviously the caregivers, obviously their work is more thing that requires more work from them, more time from their side, and obviously the time also in such a way that the other person is completely taken care of. No, I
right.
am trying to understand this point. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
helpful. And now, are there training programs or resources available to help caregivers build resilience and coping mechanisms for stressful situations?
And there's a lot of stuff out there these days. I think, right, there's a gazillion programs you could probably find online. But I think
Uh-huh.
I'd also look at the company that you work for, right? Is there an ability? Do they offer anything for you? Do you have some either one-on-one kind of coaching or advising or a therapist that you can reach out to? Um, but I think it's also looking at your particular agency or right home care office to see how do they realize the problem, right? Making sure that you let them know that this has been a problem and that they're starting to kind of offer some of this training and kind of work together for it. I know for myself, that's a lot of work myself and my colleagues do. We go into companies and help them put together programs to help people banish burnout and to, prevent burnout from getting there.
Yeah, and I think you must have experienced few things like there must be many caregivers or employees who are themselves also not aware that they're getting burned out, and they're not sure what's happening with them, but they don't like coming to work. Maybe that's also
Yeah.
the case, right? Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
think
think
I
either
see
way.
things like, right, people losing concentration on tasks, right? You can't kind of focus on things. They're having trouble sleeping at night. Right? They just feel irritated by people, right? Like I said, for me, my one of my first signs is getting irritated by my dog, right? I get annoyed by my dog. And
I get that.
right,
Yeah.
instantly it's like, oh, okay, there's, something's going on that I'm not really happy at the moment. And often it's right burnout there. So if people get one thing from this, it's start to figure out what are your tells, right? What are your signs that you are starting to get towards that place of burnout so you can stop it from getting to a really kind of dangerous point. Because, the long-term effects of burnout can be so severe, right? Anxiety and like what anxiety and stress does to your body. It can be
Yeah.
really big, right? Insomnia, heart disease, diabetes, like all of those things increase when your body is in a constant state of stress.
There are many things related to this. Yeah, I get that now. So finally, how can open communication channels be established between caregivers and agencies to address the concerns and basically prevent burnout before it happens? If you could just assist on that part too.
Sure. Yeah. And for a lot of folks, I think it's thinking about, so I think there's the individual level and then there's the kind of agency level. As an individual, know what you need, right? When you think about what's causing your burnout, what are the things you need that are going to help kind of avoid that? Is it things like consistency of work schedule, right?
Mm.
Even if it might not be your favorite shift, is it better for you to have, all nights work or all weekends, right? Think about, does that work for you? Is it that you need some more flexibility because maybe you're a parent and right now we're in the summer. And I always think, right, as a kid, you think summer's the greatest time of the year. And as a parent,
Yeah.
summer is like the hardest time of the year as you're trying to patch all these things together. So maybe you need some flexibility, right? Maybe you need some time off. Think about, can you use any professional development money that you have? Maybe there's a burnout class that you find that you want to take or a class on stress management. But the communication piece, it's you figuring out what you need and then asking for it, right? Your boss isn't going to know what you need unless you actually tell them. So when
Yeah.
you are ready to have that conversation, have a plan in place and think of kind of a few options that might help you. I always tell people, start the sentence with something like, I've been feeling really burned out lately, and I have some ideas that'll help me get back to being a better contributor to the team, right? I'll be a better employee if I can, start to get a few of these things that's going to help me. Um, and if you don't have any ideas, maybe it's going to your boss and saying, listen, I'm exhausted. I'm really feeling burnt out lately. And I want to see what some of my options are to refresh myself so I can, contribute better to the best of my ability, right? Because you're bringing it back to, I want to be a good contributor to this team. I want to work for you. I just need some help. And then I think as an organization, from an organization level, from communication, communicate with your staff and make sure they know what things you have in place. Uh, I think of even things like time off. There are so many people that I've worked with through my career that I'll start talking to them and they'll say things like, oh, I don't accrue any vacation time anymore, right? Because I haven't taken any time off in 2 years. I'll go, what? You haven't taken a day off in 2 years, right? That's terrible.
That's
And
terrible. Yeah.
right, getting people to figure it out. And I think for many folks, particularly in healthcare, right, you are there because you care about people and you
Yeah.
have a sense of empathy and responsibility. And you get into the mindset of, well, if I'm not here, who's going to do it? And you put it into like to the detriment of your own health. So know that, right? If you won mega bucks tomorrow, mega millions, if you won, $6 billion tomorrow and never showed up to work again, people would be okay, right? They would replace you. So,
Yeah.
right, in that same sense, know that, if you take a week vacation or even better, take 2 weeks and you come back, you're going to be refreshed. You're going to feel better and you'll actually do a much better job. And so for companies, make sure you're communicating to staff to say, like, we want you to take your time off. Like maybe there's a week that they can't because of whatever reason, right? You can't have every single person cannot have the same week off on your team,
Obviously. Yeah,
right?
obviously. Yeah.
But make sure there's that communication lines to say, let's talk about how you're going to use your vacation time. One company I worked for in January of every year, they would have us all sit down and block half of our vacation time for the year. So if we got at that company, we got 4 weeks. So in January, we were supposed to book 2 weeks right away to say,
Oh,
so we at least knew that we had that time on the
we had that
books.
time off. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
aware of that in priorly. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's a good thing. So, whatever I heard from your side, communication, I think, is the key for everything. Yeah, even
Yes.
for the caregivers or even if the managers that are there. So, till the time caregivers they don't communicate, obviously the managers they cannot read your mind, and obviously the
Right.
managers they also have to communicate and let them know how they can be beneficial and how they are ready to assist them.
I think the other piece there is that your managers and your leaders also have to model good behavior around this, right? As a manager and a leader, you need to take your lunch. You need to take time off. You need to model for your staff how people, right, kind of avoid and deal with and kind of banish burnout. Because if you as the manager and leader are completely burnt out, boy, you're not going to be managing your people well, and it's just going to trickle down.
Completely right. Completely right. Right. So, yeah, so this was a very good session, Colleen. Thank you. Thank you for sparing your time and sharing great insights for this. And I'm sure the audiences found these things useful. And thank you all for tuning in. Until our next episode, this is Dennis Gill signing off. Thank you, Colleen. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.